Play.
Get ready. Storm mainland over Texas, blowing from the Voodoo Sea. Clouds turn gray and all the birds flew away. All the old folks were heard the sign say it's a big one, nothing like we've ever seen before. Lord, please love us and save us. We don't want the devil knocking at our door.
Hey, today's show is sponsored by Farmer Joe's Fresh Market, located at 1401 Southwest Pine Island Road in beautiful Cape Coral, Florida. This week, Farmer Joe's has chicken tenders for $2.99 a pound, center cut bone-in pork chops, $2.99 a pound, mandarins, 2-pound bags, 2 for $5. Everything you need and more. Lee County's greatest grocery store, Farmer Joe's Fresh Market. Are you building, remodeling? Then you need to call International Marble. Family owned and operated, serving all of Southwest Florida. Give them a call and make your marble dreams come true. 239-878-2200. That's 239-878-2200. Well, welcome back, everybody, and Happy New Year. Ford O'Connell is with us, veteran political analyst, businessman, author, attorney, and oasis of knowledge. You can find Ford at FordO'Connell.com, Ford O'Connell on X, and most reputable news sources. Also, we have the author of the Shining Light newsletter, political activist Denise Nystrom from Nita Springs. I am Smokin Joe, and we will welcome you to Cracker Culture Podcast. This just in, Ford, I want to talk to you that Donald Trump was just sentenced in New York. And I was looking at this. It's kind of funny. It was a nothing burger. I'll let you follow this a little bit more than me, Ford. What do you know about what's happening today?
This is a total miscarriage of justice. This is the problem. This is when politics overtakes the legal system. What happened was he got an unconditional discharge. So there's no probation, there's no sentencing, there's no prison time, but now Democrats get to call Donald Trump a convicted felon. On the bright side, though, for Donald Trump, the issue is because now that he's been sentenced, the case can be appealed, and I think the appellate time is going to take somewhere between 6 months and a year, and I think the appellate court's going to overturn it because of the number of reversible errors, the immunity ruling, a lot of different reasons. This case is going to be overturned, but here's the problem. Everyone goes, well, it's a nothing burger in the sense that he's just they can call him a convicted felon for political reasons, but it's a little bit more than that. Think about this. Here's the entire irony. The man right now cannot vote for himself come the 2026 midterms. He also cannot own a gun, but yet he's got the nuclear codes. That shows you how ridiculous this entire ruling was. But Democrats just want to put a trophy on the mantle. And unfortunately, it's Lady Justice who got hurt in the process, as well as all Americans.
Well, and like I said, this was just to formalize Trump as a felon, like you said. And I did have a little bit of what Trump said to Judge Marchan after he was convicted. I'll play a little bit of that.
Would your client like to be heard?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. This has been a very terrible experience. I think it's been a tremendous setback for New York and the New York court system. This is a case that Alvin Bragg did not want to bring. He thought it was, from what I read and from what I hear, inappropriately handled before he got there. A gentleman from a law firm came in and acted as a district attorney, and that gentleman, from what I heard, was a criminal or almost criminal in what he did. It was very inappropriate. It was somebody involved with my political opponent. Part of the records that we're talking about, they're saying, I just noticed where he said I was falsifying business records. Well, the falsification of business records, as they said, was calling a legal expense in the books where everybody could see them, a legal expense. In other words, that legal fees or legal expense were put down as legal expense by accountants. They weren't put down by me. They were put down by accountants. I didn't.
So there's what Donald Trump says. Look, he said, I have accountants, and I understand that because a lot of things in business, we hire people to handle that so it's off our plate. But he said, I've done nothing wrong.
He's absolutely right. And he's even more right about the fact that the case should have never been brought. Think about this. We spent an entire year with America on edge, wasting the resources of Manhattan District Attorney's Office, and they can't prosecute someone who's lights someone on fire on a subway or someone who stabbed someone 70 times, but they're more concerned about harming a political opponent. And not only that, this is the first time this has ever been brought. So the entire thing is not only a miscarriage of justice, but it hurts the law in the courts of New York City going forward. And frankly, because of this ruling, I wouldn't be surprised if New York gets hurt even more, because business is going to say, if you can do this to Donald Trump, who else can you do this to? And that's the entire problem. New York City hurt itself all because Democrats wanted to go to a blue court to make a point against a duly elected president of the United States. The whole thing is a travesty. And honestly, legal scholars should be studying this for decades.
Well, Ford, I want to go ahead and talk to you about, I heard you talk about the Donroe Doctrine. Now, I'm familiar with the former President John Monroe, the Monroe Doctrine. I'm going to play a little clip I got here, and I want you to break this down for us, Ford.
Less than 2 weeks before taking office, President-elect Trump is talking about a massive expansion of U.S. territory. At a Tuesday news conference, he mentioned taking over the resource-rich island of Greenland and the Panama Canal, which the U.S. gave back to Panama in 1979. Panama says they won't give up control, and the president-elect's plan to make Canada part of the U.S. may be a tough sell, too.
Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and you take a look at what that looks like, and it would also be much better for national security.
One other Trump idea that may soon make some headway on Capitol Hill, renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America.
I'm down with the Gulf of America. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, I'm down with the Gulf of America. Let me tell you something else. Over there on our maps, it says the South China Sea. The Chinese Communist Party doesn't call it the South China Sea. They just call it the South Sea. So I do think he's absolutely right. The map should be remade. The Monroe Doctrine, President Monroe in 1823, what it basically says is the United States should control the Western Hemisphere. It should flex its muscle, and foreign actors outside of the Americas should not be interfering in the Western Hemisphere. And that's exactly what Donald Trump's doing. And when he says we should buy Greenland or take Greenland over, that is not a new idea. In fact, 4 different administrations dating back to 1876 thought about taking over Greenland in various ways. And frankly, during World War II, we did take over Greenland. And in fact, we had abandoned military bases in Greenland. The reason why you want Greenland is it's mineral rich, it's oil rich. And frankly, the Chinese Communist Party is all over Greenland right now. And it would give us a better trade route overall, thereby lowering inflation. It's a no-brainer to take over Greenland. And in fact, in 1946, President Harry Truman offered $100 million in gold bullion in Denmark, which currently is in charge of Greenland, turned it down. So that is a no-brainer, and it's nothing new. But because Donald Trump said it, somehow the media goes crazy. But then we got the Panama Canal, which is even more amazing because that we should own. There is no way. You lost nearly 30,000 Americans building the Panama Canal. We pay for the entire maintenance of the Panama Canal. Panama charges us money, and yet 70 to 75% of the ships that go through the Panama Canal are either coming to a U.S. port or from a U.S. port. We should own the Panama Canal, but the fact that the Chinese currently own 20% of the Panama Canal, essentially, or operate 20% of it, is another reason why. This is all about national security, inflation, and bringing down prices. So all of this is a no-brainer. And as for Canada, he's not talking about taking over Canada. He's talking about turning it into an economic zone, which would be better for American companies, be better for American consumers, and be better for American workers. With Canada, he's talking about turning it more into like an EU economic zone. And frankly, that makes economic sense. Every time the media or the Democrats tells you that Donald Trump has a really terrible idea, it's a really good idea because they don't want to admit how brilliant it really is.
But I got a question now. The fact Canada... Now, if we were to absorb Canada somehow, what does that say? Because they already have national health care, national education. They have all these pretty much socialist aspects in their government. What will that do if we were to absorb Canada, Ford?
Well, it won't ever become the 51st state for a variety of reasons. I do think that there's certain aspects of Canada that if you held a vote tomorrow, like the province of Alberta, they'd say, yes, let's go to the United States, because frankly, they're more conservative than the state of Oklahoma when you look at it. And frankly, Alberta has more oil than the lower 48 states in the U.S. It's really an economic zone. We're not going to take it in. But the reason is remember, we always talk about the southern border. Okay. Canada, there's 8 border sectors, and it's a 4,000-mile stretch of land among the United States and Canada. And essentially, it's porous as all heck. And frankly, they need to beef up national security on that border, and we need to protect the American worker. Canada is our largest trading partner in the entire world. And right now, we're running a $50 billion deficit with Canada, which means we're hurting U.S. companies and U.S. workers, all for the benefit of a country that has a smaller population than California.
Well, now, if they was to absorb this, now, used to, you didn't have to have a passport to go to Mexico. Now you do. If they absorb Canada, will you still need a passport, do you believe, to go into Canada, or is that?
Well, you could have what I have, which is global entry, and then you won't need that situation already. But that said, I do think if it becomes an economic zone or an economic union, as I'm describing, chances are you'd only need your driver's license to do it. And frankly, when it comes back and forth, remember, Canada is also the biggest deliverer of goods to about 17 states in the U.S. I think this makes a lot of sense. And again, it's about national security and protecting the American worker. Because I'm going to tell you, out in Western Canada, once again, the Chinese Communist Party is burrowing in out there in British Columbia, and that should worry all of us.
Well, and again, I know there's a lot of foreigners coming through Canada, through our border there. I mean, not as much as there have been in Mexico, but we still have a flow, especially people from Middle Eastern countries seem to gravitate toward Canada, and they're coming across the border there. I just don't know if we need to have some type of security in place if this is going to happen.
Well, Tom Homan, the border czar, talks about this all the time, and that is, again, it's such a porous border that we really need to be paying attention to it because, to your point, you've got Middle Eastern folks, you've got the Chinese Communist Party folks, you got Russian folks saying, why would I go to the southern border to deal with the cartels when I could just go to Canada and walk right in? That is a big problem. So, again, the Monroe Doctrine was about making sure America controls the Western Hemisphere. The Donroe Doctrine is making sure that we protect ourselves against the Chinese Communist Party. And what he's sending a message politically is that we mean business. And right now, America needs to be more ambitious when it comes to her own manifest destiny.
All right, everybody, let's go with the Donroe. Ford, out in Los Angeles, at least 10 people have perished and over 9,000 structures have been destroyed. This is continually evolving. It is horrific what's going on. And, you know, Donald Trump pretty much laid it on Gavin Newsom over a fish. And I'm going to play a little clip and we'll talk about that.
Well, it's very sad because I've been trying to get Gavin Newsom to allow water to cover. You'd have tremendous water up there. They send it out to the Pacific because they're trying to protect a tiny little fish, which is in other areas, by the way, called the Smelt. And for the sake of the Smelt, they have no water. They had no water in the fire hydrants today in Los Angeles. It was a terrible thing. And we're going to get that done. It's going to finally be done. I got it done from the federal side, and he didn't want to sign it, but it's not going to happen again like that. There's no reason. Can you imagine? You have farmers that don't have any water in California. They have plenty of water. They don't have a drought. They send it out to the Pacific, and it's crazy. So what's happening in California is a true tragedy. I know those areas very well. I have many friends living in those houses. That is a true tragedy. Nobody ever thought. I mean, virtually Beverly Hills and areas around Beverly Hills are being decimated. The biggest homes, some of the most valuable homes in the world are just destroyed. I don't even know. You know, you talk about a tax base. If those people leave, you're going to lose half your tax base of California. This is a true tragedy, and it's a mistake of the governor, and you could say the administration. They don't have any water. They didn't have water in the fire hydrants. They don't have water. And yet they have it. The water comes from, you know where? Up north. And it comes down at levels. They get millions and millions of barrels of gallons of water that they have, and they send it out into the Pacific. For the Pacific, it's like a drop. It's nothing. But for California, it would take care of the whole state. So what's happened is a tragedy, and the governor has not done a good job. With that being said, I got along well with him when he was governor. We worked together very well.
Well, that, you know, Trump basically, and what Gavin did, and it's really funny, he protected a fish, was not an endangered species. It's a damn smelt, which is like a little bit bigger than an anchovy.
And let me tell you,
why people burn houses burnt to the ground.
I once upon a time worked in the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office. I lived out in this very area that's actually on fire right now, and it's a true tragedy. My heart goes out to all Los Angelenos, but the left is missing the point here. They're trying to lay it all on climate change. I'm going to tell you something. There is nothing new about wildfires in Southern California. Basically, they've been going on since the late 1800s. And really what it is, it's a combination of things. Government incompetence. He's absolutely right. Gavin Newsom refused to sign the Water Restoration Act because he wanted to defend and protect the smelt, which I still can't even tell you, having lived in California, what a friggin' smelt is. But on top of it, you also have forest mismanagement. They do not allow controlled burns like we allow in Lee County. And essentially, you've also got a situation where they stripped $17.5 million from the fire department in Los Angeles County. You have outdated water distribution systems, and you also have population expansion. I think for Floridians who've never been out there to see how the Santa Ana winds work, and the fact that Southern California is a desert in the sense that it gets less than 10 inches of rain a year, you have to think of these wildfires as a hurricane inferno. Basically, it's a hurricane of fire, and they can't figure out how to do it. Let me tell you something else, which is going to scare the living heck out of a lot of people. In Florida, when we have a hurricane, we have evacuation routes. These fires have been going on at least since the 1800s in statehood, if not sooner, but they had no fire evacuation routes in Southern California. Not only is that incompetence, that's gross mismanagement and neglect. It borderlines, actually, it is criminal. Frankly, it's criminal. And not only should Gavin Newsom resign, but also should the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, who basically was busy in Ghana while this is going on, and they had the warnings. They knew that this was going to come. They just didn't know when. And not only that, imagine for a second we had a hurricane in Florida, okay? And you don't call out the National Guard beforehand. Well, that's exactly what Gavin Newsom did. It's like, well, I'm going to close the barn door after the horses run out. He did not call up the National Guard until after the fires broke out. And yet they had all the warnings and all the signs that this was going to happen. They just didn't know when. So think about that. That's how terrible this is. And frankly, the rest of the nation is going to wind up paying for more than $150 billion in damage. And they have the same insurance problems in Southern California, particularly along the water, that we have in South Florida. And let me tell you something. This insurance problem, whether it's Long Island, New York, South Florida, or Southern California, this has got to be fixed because people are losing everything they have. And essentially, the insurance companies are getting away scot-free.
Well, I just don't understand how they can claim to be environmentalists, because nothing could be less environmentally friendly than allowing 20,000 acres, I think it was up to now, just to be burnt to the ground. So how is that environmentally friendly? What about, I mean, we know people have obviously lost their lives, lost their house. What about the animals? What about the plants? I mean, so if they're so environmentally friendly, why on earth would they be letting this happen?
Denise, you're absolutely right, but you're using logic, and they don't use logic. They use emotion. And unfortunately, when I talk about forest mismanagement, I'm talking about moving away the scrub brush. I think down in San Diego, some family tried to remove the scrub brush and received an $800,000 fine. Think about that. You're trying to prevent your house from burning, and they're suing you. And the problem is between the climate change crazies and the DEI nutbags in LA, guess what? That all stands for die. People are going to die unless they wake up to the realities of what's going on. And when people start saying climate change, I always tell them, when it comes to these wildfires, this is nothing new. So do not drop it in that bucket, because you have to pay attention what's wrong. And I'll bet you something else. I will bet by 2026 or so, that LA is going to have either a right-leaning Democrat, maybe a gentleman like Rick Caruso, to become the mayor, or dare I say this, a Republican, because essentially everyone cannot believe the crap that's going on.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. But you know, the one thing you made the comment about them not having no evacuation plan, and that seems to go back. You think about the fires we had in Lahaina. Same thing. There was no evacuation plan. These coastal areas and these areas that are subject to limited access should have plans in their infrastructure. It should be set up in stone before anything. That should have been day one when they made it incorporated.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's very easy for a lot of people to understand this is to go back to the Maui fires. Okay. And once again, you want to talk about a state that's more even climate change crazy than California. You look at Hawaii, and again, they don't plan on that because the environment and everything else that they believe, wildlife, DEI, everything is more important than protecting people's lives and property. And unfortunately, when you're an elected official, your job is to protect the property and the people that are your constituents, and they don't do it. What's even crazier is that they gave this money away, okay, for the homeless, okay, which again, I'm all for helping the homeless, but remember, half the homeless in Los Angeles County are illegal. Think about that for a second.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that there's a way you could get ahead of it before you get to this situation. I don't think why there's not forward-thinking people. If you're in government, I would think you would be forward-thinking, and you can take that climate change. I've been sitting here in South Florida in 40 damn degrees weather. You can take that climate change and blow it right out your blowhole. I mean, there ain't no climate change here.
Well, that's exactly right. Look, you couldn't have stopped these fires, but you could have severely limited the damage that they cause. And I go back to something that we do in Lee County, and that's controlled burns. And if they would have done controlled burns in Southern California and certain parts of Northern California, they'd know even better how to control this stuff. And they would have gotten rid of the scrub brush that essentially became like accelerant once these fires started. Because I go back to the fact that if you've never been to Los Angeles, you don't understand that, one, these winds are as strong as hurricane winds, the Santa Ana winds up to 100 miles an hour, but you also have a dry area because it's a desert. So it is a perfect storm to literally light up anything. And, now the next thing that's going to go on, you ready for this, is looting. It is tragic. People have lost everything, and now you've got the looting. And remember, California, it's okay to steal up to $1,000 from a store, and there's going to be no jail time. But now all of a sudden, you're going to enforce looting laws. These people are a complete and utter joke, and I hope that people in California, particularly in Los Angeles County, wake up to the crap that has been shoveled upon them. And let me tell you something else. They want all these regulations. Well, guess what? For the folks that try to rebuild, they're going to want those deregulation real quick.
Right. Well, like I said, you give a thief an opportunity, they're going to take it. And like I said, with California, it seems like they're riddled with thieves, and we've seen it in the summer of love, and now you got people getting devastated with wildfires, and they're coming in. I don't understand how people prey on people's devastation, but they do. Well, Ford, it's about that time. We're going to drop on over here to
the man's trash.
The part was how they were saying, literally, a hurricane could take your home away, but the man's trash. I mean, that is unbelievable.
The man's trash.
Man's trash. I mean, man's trash.
Yeah, it's time for the man's trash. And now, Ford, we had put out a few weeks ago about you can ask Ford a question, send it to the show. And we have our first question for Ford. It comes from a cardiologist, Dr. Incabardi. And Dr. Incabardi wants to ask Ford, who's going to replace Marco Rubio? That was the doctor's question, Ford.
Right now, all signs point to Attorney General Ashley Moody. Frankly, I think the best thing would be for Ron DeSantis to appoint himself. To be totally honest with you, I think that would be the best thing for our state, because I do believe that Marco Rubio was a great senator. Now he's going to do national service as our Secretary of State, international service for that matter. And I do think that Ron DeSantis knows enough about what's going on after being one of our greatest governors to go to Washington and really fight for the interests of Floridians. But we'll see what happens. I do think, though, that part of the reason why I think that Ron DeSantis won't appoint himself is because if something transpires between now and when his term ends, particularly when it comes to hurricane politics, it could backfire on him.
Well, it just seems because these people's been in politics, I don't mean it's a good thing to keep them in politics. I think Ron DeSantis, his endorsement game has been utter crap. I mean, I hate to say it, I like Ron, but his endorsements, and especially in Southwest Florida, he has really put a hampering on our lives by the people that he's put in place to control.
And unfortunately, the people that worked under Ron in Tallahassee listened to one person who we all know, and his name is Terry Miller. And frankly, we have 67 counties in this country. Lee County, Collier County, Charlotte County are pretty solid red. So you're going to assume that you're going to take the words on the ground. The reason why I say Ron DeSantis would be a good senator is for the same reason that Rick Scott is a good senator, because he's actually fighting for Florida rather than the go along, get along gang of the establishment uniparty crew and the United States Senate. Not going to name the names of the people that are running it, but I'm sure you can figure it out, starting with Mitch McConnell.
Well, I don't know. I don't want to see Ashley Moody in that spot. I don't know how I feel about that seat right now. What can you tell us about Matt Gatez's seat? What's going to happen here for him?
Jimmy Petronis is going to win Matt Gatez's seat because he's got Donald Trump's endorsement. And look, I think that that's a good position for Jimmy Petronis. He's someone who's well known in the Panhandle and understands the politics of the Panhandle and what the constituents want there. And let me tell you something, he just needs to get up to Washington ASAP. And unfortunately, we're going to have to wait a couple of months for him to do that, because right now we have fewer numbers than there were Texans at the Alamo in terms of the majority of the United States House of Representatives. So the sooner Jimmy Petronis can get to Washington, D.C., the better off Florida will be.
Well, now you brought up DeSantis appointing himself. If he was to appoint himself, then that would open up the governor's seat, which we know is going to come up. And I see Byron Donalds, and I'm hearing Rick Scott. What do you see in a replacement for Ron DeSantis if he's out of the governor?
Well, also Matt Gaetz is talking about it as well, and I'm sure that somewhere in the distance, Wilton Simpson, our agricultural commissioner, is thinking the same thing. I do believe that the person who becomes our next governor, let's say Ron left tomorrow, it would actually be Nunes would be the temporary governor because she's a lieutenant governor. But when we come to 2026, I do think that Byron Donalds is the favorite, but the answer is very simple. Whoever Donald Trump endorses will be the next governor of the great state of Florida.
Well, and that being said, I mean, I'm sure Byron's amassed a war chest and funds now, but Rick's had that war chest for a while. Rick Scott's had his own war chest for a while. So competitively, if you're talking dollars to donuts, I think that Rick can outspend Byron. Do you?
Well, let's put it this way. I do think that if Rick and Byron both ran, that Donald Trump would stay out of it, because both of them have been allies of Donald Trump, and he let the horses run. And I do think that if Byron ran against Rick Scott, I do think that Rick Scott would win.
Well,
it actually kind of seems like we have a glut of politicians or people that we would think would be favorable candidates. I'm not suggesting by any means that the people that we're talking about are unfavorable. I mean, I have my own opinions on that, but it's just that when we look around the state and we look for who could, fill these positions, I always see people thinking, no, not that one. No, not that one. Now, again, I'm not suggesting that some of the people, because I am in favor of some of those people, but I just wonder now with the moves that are getting made federally, or, do we need some more leaders to, come on the scene and start to.
Yeah, Denise, I think you raised a great point. I think my concern is this is the heyday of Florida politics. I mean, we are not, for a while, we were the epicenter of the Republican Party. Okay. COVID, Donald Trump going to Mar-a-Lago, Rick Scott being in the position he's in, Ron DeSantis, et cetera. Now, Florida is the epicenter of the entire federal government. And it's taken a lot from our bench and from some very good politicians. My problem now is because Florida's become so powerful, there's a little bit of what I'll call an old boy or old girl network that is dictating who should go where. And frankly, I'm much more in favor, like you, of letting the horses run and the best candidate should do it. That's why I said if you had Byron Donalds versus Rick Scott, should Rick do it? I do think that Rick would win, and I do think that Donald Trump would stay out. And I will say this about Rick Scott. For all the knocks he gets, how shall I say, for being a little bit Melba personality-wise, I will say that he is also one of our best governors, along with Ron DeSantis, and probably one of the most underrated, because I have not seen anyone in the modern era make tough decisions the way that Rick Scott did. And they were unpopular at the time, but they're very popular now.
Right. Well, yesterday, Ford, I attended the legislative delegation meeting. I'm going to play my clip. Somebody sent it to me of me speaking, and I'm going to tell you how that aired out. So let's look at this.
Joe Phillips.
Hi, I'm Smokin Joe.
Over the last several years, I've expressed concerns over several public entities in Lee County mismanaging public funds, and especially the school district engaging in corruption. Even after 2 separate investigations proved law enforcement needed to investigate, neither the 20th Circuit Court nor the Sheriff's Department did so after receiving the findings that proved corruption was taking place. I have requested on several occasions a forensic audit, and not one elected official has responded or acknowledged the need for this. This is why I'm a staunch supporter of Recall Florida. It will give the people the opportunity to recall corrupt elected officials when they are failing to fulfill their duties. I'm a member of Recall Florida, and since 2020, our group, Recall Florida, has been lobbying the legislature to amend 58-year-old law that allows charter counties and municipalities to recall corrupt county officials. Non-charter counties don't have this right. The following associations have been lobbied against us. Lobbyists from the Florida Association of Counties, Clerk of Court and Comptrollers, Florida Supervisor of Elections, Property Appraisers Associations, and Orange County Government. All 5 voted non-charter counties holding corrupt officials accountable, a right charter counties have had since 1968. In 2023, 113 House representatives voted for the recall bill, and 12 senators in 2 committees. You can locate our petition on our social media pages, where you can sign stating that you will stand with us and not lobbyists amending the current recall law by allowing counties the same right. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
So as you can see, I was very calm in my demeanor this time. I've tried to turn a new leaf when talking to these people, but the place was packed. I got there at 9 o'clock in the morning. Couldn't even hardly get a parking place. I drove around the parking lot 10 times before I found a spot. Everybody was there. They were all there. And if you've seen in the first video, you can see Spencer Roach's little bald head when that video first popped on. And on the other side behind me was a group of people that were there advocating to get senior citizens off of the sexual predator list. I don't know if they ran that meeting in alphabetical order. It went pedophiles to podcasters, but that was what happened there, Ford. It was, and the funniest thing, Ford, some gentleman got up and spoke, elderly gentleman, and he said, "Well, I've lived here for years, and I know there's no corruption going on. We don't see no corruption going on in Lee County." And the entire place erupted in laughter. I could almost see the senators trying to hold back their laughter. Ford, it was definitely a nothing meeting. And I'm going to say this. When I was sitting there watching these for over 3 hours, they made me sit there to the very end. And as I watched State Representative Adam Botana. And he's sitting right beside Senator. Yeah. So Adam Botana is sitting right beside Pasadena, and the people are talking, and they're here to hear the community's views. Now, mind you, they gave us as a presenter, I got 90 seconds. The other people got 30. Well, I don't know how much of our views they really want to hear.
Well, let me start with the fact that you kept it PG rated. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Good on you, Joe, for doing that. These are show hearings. These are show hearings.
And that's the funniest. The funniest thing is I had 3 people approach me right off top. Cecil Pendergrass, be nice, Joe. One of the ladies from Alba, be nice, Joe. I mean, everybody comes, be nice, Joe. And I'm like, what are y'all talking about? I'm always nice. But anyway, the thing about it is they're sitting here, we get 90 seconds to say our little spiel. And here's Botana and Pasadena. They're on their phones laughing back and forth, looking at stuff. They're not paying a bit of attention to what's being said. Jonathan Martin. I've been nice to Jonathan, but when I'm sitting there and I'm watching Jonathan, one of the senators in there, and he's making some kind of goofy eyes at somebody in the audience, I don't know what they even took out of that meeting. I sat there, I felt like I wasted 3.5 hours of my day.
That's because they're going through the motions and nobody wants to hear exactly what you have to say. And because of the way our primary system works, particularly in Lee County, but also in Collier County, they're untouchable. And that's what they're telling you. And until somebody holds them accountable, they're going to keep pretending like whatever you say, whether it's true or not, matters. And they're just going to go about their own business. And in many cases, not all of them, but in many cases, lining their own pockets. That's just what goes on in Lee County. And because, let me bring it back, because it's the heyday of Florida, and because they have an R next to their name, nobody questions anything because they think, oh, it's a Republican. It must be run right. I'm going to tell you, if this stuff continues and Florida takes a dip and there's some bad decisions and our budget and our treasury isn't worked out, we're about to become Chicago due to the incompetence of our own elected officials.
Well, Ford, the main reason that delegation met yesterday was to discuss the topic of single member districts. Now, the original deal, they wanted to have single member districts and add 2 at-large seats. And we talked about this super mayor or whatever. And I said I'd never support that. Well, I was approached by several people, and I'll tell you, the Cochran family, they approached me. They want to support the single member districts as long as they don't have the 2 at-large. And I might can get behind that, but I don't trust them. Because Terry Miller, who controls everything, is advocating. I even seen him waving signs for this single-member district. And, you know, who's the key spokesman for single-member districts?
Terry Miller. And that's the problem.
And Matt Caldwell.
Well,
yes.
Terry Miller's
business partner and our property appraiser.
They're like Siamese twins, am I wrong?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
And
Denise knows.
Yeah, she's been.
Well, I mean, you know, I did a deep dive into this whole single member district thing, and really, this is a good segue because Joe was there to speak on behalf of Recall Florida. And one of the things that Recall Florida will tell you is that Lee County is one of 20 counties out of the 67 in Florida that has a county charter. So in theory, we should be more sovereign, not less sovereign. However, that becomes something that's debatable because the Charter Review Committee is virtually, well, I guess ineffective, but that's as a result of the people that are on it and as a result of those people doing what it is that the commissioners have wanted them to do for how many ever years. But when it comes right down to it, 4 out of the 5 commissioners are actually Terry Miller candidates. So now, lo and behold, Terry Miller wants a county manager, a county mayor. Let's not forget that was a huge topic of conversation not more than a year ago, okay? And the people were not having it, and the commissioners were not having it. Fast forward, you know, Matt Caldwell is running around telling all the Democrats that if they jump on board of the single member district, they're likely to get a Democrat that would become a county commissioner, and all of a sudden they'll be represented. And in an article that he recently wrote, he said bluntly, the Lee County Charter Review process has failed. Well, Matt, you and Terry are the people that put 4 out of the 5 commissioners into office. So if the Charter Review, committee has failed, aren't you really responsible for that? And then the other thing is going back to Joe being there on behalf of Recall Florida. The whole idea about having a county charter is that you're supposed to have more control over what you're doing locally, localized government. Okay. So why on earth would anybody turn our ability to have more rights at the local level and hand it off to 120 representatives and I think, 40 or 60 states, Florida state senators? Because that's less sovereign, not more sovereign. And, you know, once they go to a referendum in 2026, if this passes, they'll never come back to the people again, and they'll add anything that they want to during the next legislative session in that bill. So that's been my argument to people in general about with regard to what Gia Lombardo, Esposito, Jonathan Martin, and Adam Botana are putting forward. And of course, Matt Caldwell and Terry Miller being the big people that are shoving this behind the scenes. So that I got to tell you something else. Sorry, I'm on a roll here. But so I was rereading so first of all, they had these town hall meetings for probably the better part of a year. And all they talked about was single member districts. Well, then Mike Gialombardo got pressed to give a draft copy of the bill. So in December, late December of 2024, this draft copy comes out, and lo and behold, it's not just 5 single-member districts; it's 5 single-member districts, and it's 2 at-large districts. And oh, by the way, depending on the population, and not the voting population, there's another word for that. Ford, you might be better at that than I am, decennial or something of that nature. So in other words, they're not even necessarily here full time. We're going to go ahead and add county commissioners. And then it was going to be that the only people that could be chair were going to be one of the 2 at-large members, and the only people that could be vice chair of the county commissioners was one of the 5 single-member districts. So, okay, so that wasn't flying. And so, yesterday I received an update, or a couple days ago, I received an updated copy of the potential draft bill. And there is something in here that is very, very concerning to me, and it is this. So now they're talking about how they'll do the referendum in 26. 28 would begin the single member district process where people would vote for only commissioners with the single member districts. But it said, no commissioner shall serve more than 3 consecutive terms on the board. Well, what they haven't said is, if you're now a single member district, is it a do-over? That's not in here. I mean, I don't know, because, some of these people are scheduled to term out. And if they get another 3 consecutive terms, that's another 12 years.
Ford, to put this in, let's put it in a sports deal. If you're losing, you're going to trade players. If the player trade don't work, you're going to get rid of the head coach. If you look at this area like that, it's time to get rid of the coaching staff. And I'm talking about Terry Miller and Matt Caldwell. It's time to let's fire the coaches, trade the staff and the players, and let's see if we can't get a better Lee County. I think it's possible, but it's never going to be possible with the people we have put in place, and we're allowing to continually hold those spots, and they make the rules for us, and we're supposed to guide them, but they're not taking guidance from us. It's as easy to see as that meeting yesterday.
Yeah, look, they have no interest in taking guidance, and really they want Tallahassee to control Southwest Florida, not Southwest Floridians. And to your point, yes, you need to fire the coaching staff, the entire coaching staff. And frankly, you need to cut 80% of the players. I'm going to tell you, not all of them, but they are the group overall, just in general, should all be cut, and the coaches should be fired. And unfortunately, most Southwest Floridians don't see this. Most Lee County folks don't see this because they're so busy thinking about, gee, is it going to be Marco Rubio, Ashley Moody, Rick Scott, Donald Trump? And trust me, I love all those people. But as I've always said, in Lee County and anywhere in Southwest Florida, the most important people in your day-to-day life are the county commissioners. And until people wake up to that, we're in real trouble.
Well, I think the county commissioners have actually cut off their noses to spite their faces, and my point being that they've had it a certain way for a very long period of time. So fast forward, what actually ends up happening, and one of the things that Terry Miller and Caldwell and Gia Lombardo are playing into, is that you had the race between Amanda Corcoran, who lives out in District 5, against Mike Greenwell, who lives out in District 5. And people have really had it with Mike Greenwell turning his agricultural property into commercial property, making big money, bringing, building and developing out to the Alva area. But that was a countywide race. So what happened was Amanda actually won in District 5, but she lost in the county. So now you've got Miller and Caldwell and Gia Lombardo capitalizing on that, because you have angry voters that, guess what? They want single member districts. And so they're showing up in force now saying, well, you know what? Amanda would have won if these were single member districts. So I
tried to talk to the Cochran family. I talked to them about it. And, they said, well, would you be in support of 5 single member districts? I said, it depends on how it's wrote. I said, they're not giving you something if they're not getting something. Terry Miller's not going to give up those 2 or 3 extra seats for no gain.
Well, that's exactly right. And it completely depends on how it's written. And obviously, if Terry Miller's for it, it's a really bad idea for Southwest Florida and Lee County. Okay. I
agree.
If you're going to have single member districts, you got to have 2 or 3 floaters so that you can go against it. My question is, when I look at the other 4 districts, how many of those people won their own single member district? It's not so much, and I understand the Cochrans are pissed, but it's not so much they have won. My question is, on average, Do the people that actually represent their district win their district if it were a single person district? I don't know the answer. We're going to have to run the numbers on that. And we'd probably have to run the numbers over the span of 2 decades just to see, because I'd always be interested to know whether Frank Mann actually ever won his own district, because that's the district we're talking about, aka Greenwell Inc.
And I want to say that I think Amanda Corcoran would have made an outstanding county commissioner, and she absolutely had my support over somebody like Mike Greenwell. That is for sure. So I understand their position. But when you also look at this bill, what they're doing is they're changing the county charter, and basically they're amending the home rule. And home rule, which through the county charter has not even occurred yet. The last thing that they would need to do was to hold their own referendum, not have the state legislators hold a referendum.
Well, that was always my point, that they want Tallahassee to control Southwest Florida and Lee County, not Southwest Florida and Lee County.
But because they've all created this mess, Terry Miller, Matt Caldwell, and every single of the 30 people that are Terry Miller candidates, including 4 out of the 5 county commissioners, and now you've got angry voters, I think what the county commissioners should do is they should hold their own referendum, thus preventing the state from coming in and taking over. But they don't want to lose the ability to run countywide. So they're cutting off their noses to spite their faces, as far as I'm concerned.
I still have to go back to what Joe's saying. If Terry Miller's pushing hard for something, I think the problem is to make this has to be simplified for a lot of the voters. Really 2 or 3 bullet points, and that's the hard thing here. They're getting everyone bogged down in minutia, and they go back, single member districts, it'll benefit you. And people aren't thinking, gee, well, what happens if this situation occurs, if that situation occurs? And that's the problem. They're out there sloganing and using a narrative. And unfortunately, that narrative, if it was so true, we would have done it before now.
No, I agree. And again, like I said, I as soon as I seen them pictures of Terry Miller out there, we didn't hardly see Terry Miller out in public before we started bringing up his name. Mm-hmm. Now, let's just get that out there. We brought Terry out from behind his rock. And now he's out there, and that's the first time I ever seen him holding up sign waving for anything, and it's for this single member district. That scares me more than anything that could possibly, that could be written perfectly, but Terry Miller's backing it. There's some caveat for him that's going to screw us.
Now, I know what's so crazy is, I'll just drop something. When I ran up there in that area, I won Alva, where he allegedly lives. And he was basically trying to throw every rock at me. The folks in Alva know that Terry Miller's full of.
Yeah, that's how's he living in Alva with the Alva people out there? They got to be, if they realize that he's the one that's putting the screw to them like this, boy, they could be an uprising in Alva if they figure it out.
Well, that's exactly right.
So I'd like to say something on air because I want people to mark my words. So some of the people that are waiting in the wings right now, well, one is Brian Hammond to potentially either extend the amount of time that he's in office or to become the county mayor. That means the mayor that's over all other mayors and all other municipalities in the county. I guess we can get him to retirement age if we do that. The other person that's been waiting in the wings very dutifully and doing everything that the Millerites want him to do is Andrew Sund, who is chair of the Conservative Leadership Caucus PAC and was president of the Cape Coral Republican Club, who took money from the members, so on and so on. And then the other thing is, and I want to just say this because he did a really, really good job of hiding it, and I find it absolutely despicable, is Matt Caldwell sat as our property appraiser, state committeeman, and Terry Miller's business partner. So basically, he sat in 2 elected official positions while he was Terry Miller's business partner. He was real quiet about it, and then he put it in writing during his last campaign. So if anybody's the biggest snake in the grass, it's him.
Well, I agree. Well, folks, we're about to wrap it up here for this week's show. Ford, what do you got coming up? Anything good?
It's going to be inauguration time. I'm going to have to go up to Washington, and I can't wait. But I'll tell you this, it's going to be a lot of work, but I'm looking forward to it.
Well, Denise, you got your Shining Light newsletter. It comes out. When does that come out again?
So it comes out periodically because it is topical. If you want to subscribe, it's shininglightfyi@gmail.com. I have a corresponding website. But I don't inundate people's inboxes with a weekly newsletter. I just remain topical. As things occur, I let you know.
Well, folks, I want to thank you for joining us for this week's show. We'll be back with another show soon. We love you, Florida. For Fort O'Connell, Denise Nystrom, I'm Smokin Joe, and we'll see you soon.